started. My name is Nirja Arvamudan. I'm the director of the Ginsberg Center at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and the proud publisher of the Michigan Journal of Community Service Learning. I'm very lucky to get to work with Nicole Springer, who's the editor and helping on this call as well, and Patricia Jewell, who's our graduate assistant for the journal. And we are very lucky to be partnering with Campus Compact every time we do these Meet the Authors, because it's a chance for us to kind of, reason we called it Community Engaged Scholarship Revealed, it's a chance for us to hear and learn from the authors themselves in their own words, not just about the findings, but the process they use to do their research. And part of our reasoning for this is the journal has really been trying for a number of years to sort of unpack the mystery of scholarship and publishing. Because we think part of it is how, where power hides, right? That when we aren't able to talk about those things, it becomes something that not everybody can access. And not only are we trying to democratize knowledge, but we're also trying to democratize the process of publishing itself. So that being said, Nicole, you want to go ahead and go forward on the slides? Thank you. So just very briefly, I'd love to talk about the journal, but we'll do it very, very briefly. So I think it's helpful. You can use the QR code to learn more. We have ways to connect with the journal, whether you want to meet with editors, if you want to talk through your ideas a little bit. We love reviewers for the journal. So, but that's to get more information. What we're looking for, the journal is focused on research theory, pedagogy, and other matters related to community engaged scholarship in higher education. So there are lots of journals now. The Michigan Journal is one of the first two to sort of establish the field, but now there's lots. So it's important to know where you're headed when you come to the journal. And we say that the theory and research matters because when we get submissions, often the most common feedback we give is, how does this tie back to the scholarship itself? So it's really important to think about that. We've been open access for a number of years, over 10 years. And so there's no fees, but we are indexed. So that's important to know as well. We really do try to encourage a diversity of methodologies and research styles. So because we're a journal that cuts across multiple disciplines, we're multidisciplinary. So if you are writing from a particular disciplinary perspective, we really want to encourage you to think about how do you reach audiences that are not only in your field. So that writing is more accessible, and that's something we look for in our reviews. And we do try to support authors before and after publishing. So it's really important to us that we, again, take care of the author as well as the content, right? It's not just about the writing, but what's the experience like? So we use some different processes like the last item there, the collaborative peer review. So if you're a peer review, we get to have a unique experience with the Michigan Journal. We actually have reviewers talk to each other after they've done their initial review. It doesn't mean that they have to agree. It's not a consensus experience, but they do get to talk about their experience of the article, and then that might change the feedback they give at the end, and then they submit separately. So all of those are sort of components of the journal. Happy to answer more questions if you're interested, or you can use the QR code to reach us more. All right, go ahead, Nicole. And with that, we will start with our first publication. Abby and Jaden are on the call. So sometimes we can't get every author, but we try to get a good representation. And they're going to be talking about It is Power for Young People, Enacting Hope by Amplifying Critical Youth Research for School Change. So Abby and Jaden, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jaden Leary. I'm currently a first-year student at UC Davis and the executive director of a nonprofit called the Journal for Youth Voice, a completely youth-led and run international publication.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abby Rumbalski. I'm a lecturer and community engaged researcher in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. I co-founded Youth Rock, which is a YPAR program run out of our Urban Research Outreach Engagement Center. I'm the mom of 2 teenagers, and this will be my 5th summer working in partnership with Dr. Sylvie Lafayette in her district's YDA program, which Jaden will contextualize as I met him there when he was an intern as a high schooler in 2023.
Yeah, YDA is a district internship program where young people are hired by the school district to conduct graduate level research on issues that directly affect students in their schools. During my year, 2023, our cohort researched student-teacher relationships and their impact on students' academic journey.
So within the process of research and writing, as related to any kind of community engaged research, there's often what I describe as a concentric circle. So there's a main inquiry, main research project where the purpose of young people, school, community, they have that core inquiry. And then there's a type of metacognition or outside circle that we may ask of the study itself. And so in YDA's summer of 2023, their cohort intentionally reviewed 3 years of work before them, asking how teacher-student relationships impacted student experiences since 2020. And because of that question, it required that we learned about the history and inquiry from the different youth teams and from different years of data. And so Jaden's cohort pictured here and their research focused on those student-teacher relationships because they determined that is what was most missing and most promising as a factor towards school change. So then, if you get to the outer circle in YDA, sharing counter stories, reading critical texts, discussing struggles or delays in change, revealed what YDA teams in the past had done and taught us lessons that we wanted to explore more in this manuscript. So together, Jaden and Dan and I worked to understand the process of leadership for young people in this youth engaged research. And like Jaden said, how this YDA research process itself was power for young people.
And our work, both in this research and YDA, came primarily from two groups, adults and young people. From the adult perspective, we found an important emphasis placed on being alongside youth, struggling, sharing, and working together towards a common goal. In the case of YDA and my cohort, it was improving student-teacher relations in the district across all levels. We also found it was critical for adults to historicize their work and remain conscious of potentially devaluing or co-opting the work of young people.
Thanks, Jaden. When we did this, we used a three-part frame because we had traced through the literature how we saw youth leadership being denied or concealed or discussed. And it was easy to lose hope because the status quo in schools can seem really stagnant, but with those discussions, that seemed to change. And so, Jaden, I just wondered before you wrap up with the implications for youth, like what example do you want to share about how important it was to learn from the history of the young people who came before you?
I think that one of the most important things that I learned during my cohort in YDA that I learned was done by a previous cohort YDA was in most elementary schools, I would assume, we had a gifted and talented program, um, which the YDA cohort recommended get changed to talent development. And the reason for that was during my elementary school years, I can distinctly remember the kids in those in that program sort of being seen as better generally across the board, not just in an academic sense. Um, sorry, but almost in a holistic sense. And with the change of, well, it was past my time, but with the change of talent development, there's also a huge racial aspect to it as well. Um, Whether those kids are more likely to go into AP and IB programs within our school district, the kids in the gifted and talented program was very obvious. And now with the change of talent development, you sort of open it up to a broad subsect of the elementary school kids that don't really feel isolated just because they may have not done extremely well on one test. It's now broader.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jaden. So with that example, like it was so important for us to be overt about how race was implicated within this research and to honor the lived experiences of the students and then of like their friends, their peers, their families who are also part of the research of their research process. And I know we'll hear a lot more from Teresa Harrison and her team about that coming up. So I'm excited to hear from her. Jaden, yeah, what about the implications for youth? Where did that leave you?
Yeah, you know, based on interviews in my cohort, reviewing YDA artifacts and reviewing broader academic research, we create a few urgent themes that we want the audience to take up in areas of youth leadership and community engagement, research, and adult collaboration. One was the importance of understanding that meaningful change often takes time, both applicable to in the cases of school change, but generally in life, it takes time. Work done today may not be visible till tomorrow, or even in the near future. If you are able to see it. Another was the need for transparency, helping young people better understand the systems that shape their experiences and opportunities in school. And I'm excited to hear about. I'm excited to hear from the rest of the authors about their experiences, and hope to talk to some of you guys in the breakout rooms.
Hey. Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa Harrison. My co-authors are not with me here today, but they are Dr. Yefeng Xu, Dr. Patrice Forrester, and Dr. Ashley Lewis. So I originally came to this research project as a doctoral student. I started working with Dr. Xu as a co-PI on a grant proposal that we submitted in 2020 for a Racial Justice Aspire grant offered at our university. This grant provided funding, as I'm sure many of your universities did, to study issues of race after the murder of George Floyd. And as a result, we crafted a study that looked at disparities in grandparents raising grandchildren among Black and white grandparents. Our recruitment efforts to outreach to grandparents took almost a full academic year before we started to really collect data. And as a result, we spent a significant amount of time building relationships with the school principals, social workers, and state agency administrators who assisted us in recruiting participants for our study. In those subsequent years, up until the next election in 2024, we saw that there was a growing backlash to racial justice, whether it was against protest, increased book bans, or anti-DEI policies. So as an outgrowth of that grandparent study, we decided to go back and interview the school and community partners about their perspectives on racial justice research. We knew that to enact and make any of the changes from the recommendations made by the grandparents about raising their grandchildren, it would need to be done in collaboration with these schools, organizations, and agencies. So knowing how they were thinking about racial justice in this moment, especially when in our state we were experiencing significant backlash, was important. I'm sure many of you, as scholar researchers, publishing a research paper is always on your mind to some extent. But honestly, we did not go into this research project with that in mind. We weren't looking to do this research to get a publication out of it. So for that reason, I'm going to describe our research process and then describe how we tackled writing up the research project. So our research process consisted of meeting monthly as a full research team. All of our notes and data were kept on a shared secured drive, and we used Deduce software to analyze our data. After conducting initial interviews with participants across various sectors, it was clear that we had something of interest that we wanted to publish. With 4 people working on this research team, and with me being the lone doctoral student at the time, I decided to take the lead, which meant that I would also get lead authorship on the publication. And I was eager to do that, to take on the challenge, to learn. I had the capacity in terms of the workload among our team members to take on the heavier duties of the writing process. So once that was decided, 2 authors independently coded a single transcript to create the initial code book. We went through a process of additional coding, modifications, merging of codes, and redefining codes to best reflect the participants' experiences and perspectives. As the lead author, I coded all 9 transcripts, and then we divided the interview transcripts amongst the remaining team members. So each of the remaining researchers had at least 3 transcripts to code. I believe it was very helpful to our writing process that everyone on the research team had coded at least a third of the interviews conducted. It would have been much more challenging to pull together quotes to align with our theoretical framework if only half of the research team had completed the coding. In terms of our theoretical framework, this was probably the most challenging in terms of our writing process because we initially started out using 2 frameworks. However, during the peer review process is when it was suggested that perhaps we rearrange some parts of our paper to make it easier to follow. As a writing team, we had to decide, do we want to take advantage take advantage of that advice and really readjust our writing process and completely rework the paper, or simply eliminate a framework to make it more easy to understand the paper. And even though I, as lead author, was really tied to the one particular framework that they were recommending us get rid of, we collectively as a group decided to get rid of that framework and let it go. And it did completely help the flow of our paper. It was much easier to connect our quotes from school, state agency, and community organization leaders with each aspect of the activism, learning, action trifecta, which if you come to my breakout session, we can talk more about. Slide 2. So in terms of writing up the final paper, we really divided it up based on our interest areas. So for example, Dr. Lewis is a program evaluator and spends a lot of time with methodology. So when we got to the research design and data analysis sections of the writing, she was eager to take on those sections. Since I was the lead author, I knew one of the heaviest lifts of writing a paper is the literature review section, so I primarily took on that task. In terms of our findings, we identified that for an environment to be anti-racist, change had to happen at the institutional level. It was not enough for individuals at the institution to be personally committed to anti-racist practices if they were going to be surrounded by people and policies that made it impossible for them to professionally practice their personal commitments. There was a greater need for cross-sector collaboration among those committed to racial justice work, understanding that state agencies, for example, tended to hold the purse strings for many of the nonprofits, organizations, and schools. So if state agencies were abiding by anti-DEI policies, that was going to have a chilling effect on the organizations those state agencies interacted with as well. Another finding that we found was institutions needed to provide ongoing professional development. For example, both educators and social workers we encountered in the field mentioned that they would appreciate if their graduate programs would offer continuous professional development to their alumni, particularly in moments like these, when there may be more of a commitment to racial justice in higher education spaces than in K-12 or at state agencies. And finally, the leaders of these institutions must be committed to dismantling unjust systems, understanding that racism is systemic and structural. So examining the systems our institutions have in place is key. In terms of implications for practice, we said understanding what is the responsibility of leaders to advocate on behalf of racial justice during times of increased scrutiny, the necessity of having allies across sectors who are willing to advocate for racial justice, and finally, can we do racial justice research in today's political climate? In terms of the impact of our study, obviously I can't imagine an article being more timely or relevant than the moment we are in now. The leaders of all social and cultural institutions are being challenged. And as you've seen, we're failing across multiple sectors. If no one is willing to push back against these policies, then we very well may see that we will fundamentally see a shift in the type of research we're allowed to do in the academy. So I'll stop there. And I look forward to the conversation in the breakout room as well. Thank you all.
Thank you, Teresa and Abby and Aiden. And we have a chance. I mean, what I think is really interesting is how these two articles talk to each other. So you're going to get a chance as participants to engage with both sets of authors. Unfortunately, Andrew, as our third author, isn't here, so I think we might end up getting a little more time.
I just made it.
Just got out of class. Fantastic! Perfect timing. Perfect timing. So then we can move on. But I just wanted to say briefly with both the prior to. It's really interesting to see the ways that you are thinking. I really appreciated the ways you shared the process you use and the questions you were asking and considering, and how you even changed both from feedback from your co-writers as well as from the reviewers. So it's really nice to see that the interaction of how ideas can evolve. So Andrew, off to you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Can you hear me? Great. So, thanks to Campus Compact for this opportunity, and thanks to those of you who have tuned in, especially if this is as busy a time for you as it is for me. I really appreciate you taking some of that time to join us today. My article is called Restorative Justice as a Framework for Critical Service Learning, and it aims to explore the areas of overlap between restorative justice work and critical service learning pedagogy, in order to identify what I take to be a somewhat novel approach to community engaged teaching. So I've been practicing community engaged teaching in one form or another for about 15 years now. My interest in restorative justice is a little more recent, but one of the first things I noticed when I started reading and learning about restorative justice was that both of these fields are neither, or rather neither of these fields are simply a field of practice nor simply a theoretical domain. But both are a sort of a theoretical field which is intrinsically connected to and refined by a practice. So what political philosophers and other scholars call praxis. So that leads me to the first topic that we were asked to reflect on today, which is the process of writing the article. So I'm a philosopher by training, so my work typically begins with reading widely on a given philosophical issue or debate, thinking carefully about what I might have to contribute to that debate, and then beginning to craft an argument. So some of that was at play here, but unlike empirical scientists, philosophers don't begin from data, and there are a few experiments to perform that are directly relevant to the kinds of questions we pursue. But in this case, sort of the object of my reflection was my own teaching, and of course the plethora of scholarship addressing community engaged learning and restorative justice. So the sort of starting by reading part was pretty similar. And combined with the collaborative review process, though, this became an opportunity to establish a kind of iterative process. That's the image that I included on the slide here. So starting with writing and then, doing some teaching, kind of testing out some of the ideas that I was writing about, reflecting on how that went, coming back to the writing and thinking about, how what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what needs, more work, either work in the sense of working out the writing or work in the sense of, thinking about the teaching strategies, and then, on and on through that process. But in terms of what the two fields of study, in terms of the things that I identified that the two fields sort of have in common, I think both emphasize social transformation. So, one of the key features of critical service learning that distinguishes it from traditional service learning, according to Tanya Mitchell, is this idea that we're working toward social transformation, right? Not merely just, a charity or meeting some temporary needs or something like that, but actually trying to change the communities that we're working in some measurable way. Both of the fields also emphasize participation and attempt to solicit participation, and think about what equitable participation looks like and how we can avoid sort of reproducing power relationships and power inequalities among participants. And both try to collaboratively identify and hopefully achieve some mutually defined goals. So that's sort of the starting point where I noticed this sort of core commonality, which got me to thinking about what would it look like to have a community engaged pedagogy that sort of was grounded in restorative principles. So in case you're not familiar with restorative justice, I suppose I should say that it's a strategy that has a lot of different applications, but is generally employed in the wake of some kind of harm. That could be sort of narrow interpersonal harm or up to massive social injustice. And the idea is for harmed and culpable parties to come together in dialogue to understand the nature of the harm and find a path forward. So in the paper, I explore what this would look like as a pedagogy of community engagement. Without reducing communities to their deficits, I think it's fair to say that much critical service learning work is pursued in the context of social injustice, which of course is a kind of harm, and aims to remediate that injustice to some extent. Or at least it's certainly true of my work in this space, or at least what I aspire to in this space. So the next step for me was to think through this approach as a distinct method. And here's where this sort of iterative process comes in, right? Because unlike a more traditional philosophical work, I refined the work not just by reading, reflecting, and discussing, but also by applying it in my teaching, thinking about how that went, talking with students about how that went, and so on. So my first attempt to do this was a community engaged course on racial justice, which partnered with local activists, organizers, professionals, and community members to gain a working understanding of sort of the state of racial injustice in our region. We're in South Bend, Indiana, by the way. So these folks included an administrator and students from our local school district, the director of a graduate, the director and a graduate of a regional prison education program, the director of a local Hispanic serving community center, the former director of health equity from our county health department, the co-founder of the local chapter of Black Lives Matter, and others. So we learned about racial injustice not only from textbooks, documentaries, and news articles, but from these community partners' experiences and knowledge. With this knowledge at hand, a small group of social justice fellows, who also acted as discussion leaders for the course, were then supposed to collaborate with one or more of these partners to develop a tangible initiative to address some aspect of the harm that was studied. So the setup was sort of like I had a one-semester course in the fall, but that was paired with a year-long social justice leadership fellowship. So the fellows played this role in the class in the fall as sort of peer mentors and discussion leaders. And then they were supposed to kind of build a project with one of the community partners that they could carry through for the rest of the year. To be honest, that didn't work out exactly the way I had planned the first time around. The first group wanted to take on a project that was kind of more internal to campus, and so I let them move in that direction. But by the second iteration, a new group of student leaders had landed on a viable and interesting project, working with local affordable housing advocates and the Indiana Eviction Justice Network to attend eviction hearings, gather data, and use that data to advocate for more equitable, tenant-friendly policies in the state of Indiana. They also created and updated a more thorough list of rental assistant resources in the region for the group that was had long been established as attending these eviction hearings. And so that's one example, and I suppose now I've transitioned to the application to practice part. But I'll mention just a couple more examples, more directions that I've begun to take this idea of restorative critical service learning. So first, I've incorporated some of the aspects of the teaching social action model developed by Scott Myers-Lipton out of San Jose State. If you're not familiar with that method, I'd encourage you to take a look at it. It's really interesting and promising approach. It has students actually developing campaigns in the context of a class. So identifying specific policies, internal or external, that they advocate to change. So in my first effort to run my Introduction to Justice Studies course this way, I had students campaigning for changes in campus parking procedures, in local regulations on short-term housing rentals, federal recognition of a local Native American tribe, and more. So the extent of community engagement varies here, depending on whether they choose an internally or externally focused project. But I think this model also fits the restorative CSL model, or at least complements it in interesting ways. And I've also recently developed a short-term study abroad program in Northern Ireland, exploring restorative justice as a solution to the, or as a sort of approach to the peacemaking following the troubles there. But looking at the time, maybe I'll just leave that, and if folks are interested, I can talk about it a little more in the breakout. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you so much, Andrew. So now this is your chance, audience, to connect with our authors. So you get to choose your own adventure. You can even bounce between rooms if you wanted to talk to more than one author. So each of them will be ready to answer questions. You can come in with your curiosities, and they may have additional things they definitely didn't get a chance to say in their very brief 7 minutes. So Nicole's going to open out the breakout rooms, and you can just pick. If you have any questions, let us know. And then we'll bring us back together, I think, only at the very end, if at all. So feel free to take the time you have remaining to talk with authors. So if you have any trouble joining a room, just let us know, but you should be able to just look under more and breakout rooms, or join a breakout room, and then pick where you'd like to go. And Abby and Jaden, you join your own group. So go ahead and join your room. Yeah, there you go. And Drew, you too. Perfect. Annie, do you need any help? Oh, nope, you figured it out. James, are you here to chat with me because I'm so awesome?
I was trying to get here earlier. I just left a meeting, so I was like, I ain't gonna try to swing by. I'm cool wherever.
Welcome back. So we really thank everyone for taking time to talk. I'd love to hear if you have any insights from, well, it's all the authors, but the ones who are left. But if anyone would like, even the authors, I'd love to hear Annie and James too. But if there are insights you had from the conversation, I think we started doing this as a partnership between Compact and MJCSL because we really thought there needs to be more opportunities for authors to share and talk with readers, right? And to sort of make the writing itself more visible. So, anywho, any insights or thoughts from those who are left or on the call?
Yeah, I'll start. First, let me just say, I know I wasn't able due to a prior commitment to come at the time I ideally wanted, but the time in which I had was immensely beneficial. So I want to just give kudos to all of the authors. I know this is like a labor of love that often doesn't get appreciated because you like do all this time, you work, you write, and then it gets published, and then you wonder who is reading it or who are impacted by it. And I just want to say, keep doing the work and continue to plant seeds, as my grandmother would say. You just never know where they're going to take root. And so I've been encouraged by the conversation that I had in the group that I had. Some of the takeaways that I definitely think are important is the importance of finding ways to sustain and institutionalize the work. As we have seen, things get totally deconstructed and torn apart or reconfigured, however language you want to insert into that. I think what I heard was like I was just blown away by how how intentional and how integrated the work had become. And I just saw how, and I thought about some of the programs we have that have benefited the most. Our students have been the ones that have had that similar characteristic. So, thinking it for me, how can we institutionalize the work more? The other thing that I thought was really important too that I took away is how do we bring our students even more so into the work so that
Mhm.
they can benefit both professionally and personally. It was clear, and Jaden, I hope you don't mind me saying that it had greatly impacted you and your academic trajectory, which by default has impacted you personally. And so I just think having me think, how can we maybe not create the same thing. Every
Mhm.
place is a little different, but how can we borrow some elements of some of the things that were shared in this journal art? I mean, this journal, uh, the articles that were published in ways that can help others and help
Yeah.
our students in particular. So
Thanks, James.
yeah.
I think about the conditions you all have created, right? I agree when I heard Eden and Abby talk, it was, there was clearly a camaraderie and a collaborative spirit that doesn't happen automatically. It's very intentional. And so I think about, what are the ways we can learn from both the writing and the conversation to see how we can do that in other spaces that we might be in. Anyone else?
It was just for me it was nice to connect with Drew, who is doing a really great program at his university. And I was just sharing that I come from a background of service learning and used a similar scholar as a inspiration, a big part of my dissertation around critical service learning, and how badly I would like to bring service learning to the Ross School of Business here at the University of Michigan. So it was just nice to connect with fellow like-minded individuals and talk about the great work. So I just really appreciated the opportunity. So thank you.
Annie, if you want to chat about that, I'd be happy to do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Neirdre, I talk with Gabby often about I I have all I want to do it very badly, but I don't really have a lot of the support I need over
Yeah.
at Ross. So
Yeah. Well, we can be co-conspirators. So
I'm here for it.
yeah, well, thank you so much. Again, James said it so beautifully, but you all shared really wonderful insights, not only the writing that you did initially, but also the conversations and the questions you raised in your presentations today. We really appreciate the time you've taken. It's extra on top of the writing, but we hope you saw it as the opportunity we try to provide to give you a chance to have a real conversation about this work that you've probably spent quite a bit of time thinking about and writing about. So we look forward to future conversations with you. Hope you join future Meet the Authors and continue to try to publish in the journal. We'd love to see more publications from you. And so let us know if we can be of help in any way. We should put, Nicole, the QR code for the journal, not just compact. I can be all salty with her, but and you can take that out. And so we appreciate you all and have a good rest of your day.